Welcome back in part 2 of Volkswagen. From 1948, Volkswagen became an important element, symbolically and economically, of West German regeneration.
Heinrich Nordhoff, 1899 to 1968, a former senior manager at Opel who had overseen civilian and military vehicle production in the 1930s and 1940s, was recruited to run the factory in 1948.
In 1949, Major Hearst left the company, now reformed as a trust, controlled by the West German government and government of the state of Lower Saxony.
The sedan or people's car, Volkswagen is a Type 1.
Apart from the introduction of the Volkswagen Type 2 commercial vehicle, van, pickup, and camper, and the VW Carmangia sports car, Nordhoff pursued the one-model policy until shortly before his death in 1968. Volkswagens were first exhibited and sold in the United States in 1949 but sold only 2 units in America that first year.
On entry to the U.S. market, the VW was briefly sold as a victory wagon.
Volkswagen of America was formed in April 1955 to standardize sales and service in the United States.
Production of the Type 1 Volkswagen Beetle increased dramatically over the years, the total reaching 1 million in 1955.
The UK's first official Volkswagen importer, Colburn Garages of Ripley, Surrey, started business with importing parts for the models brought home by soldiers returning from Germany. Canadian Motors Limited brought in Canada's first shipment of Volkswagens on 10 July 1952, shipping order 143,075.
The order consisted of 12 vehicles, 3 Model 11C, a black, green, and sand color, 3 11 GS, a chestnut brown and 2 azure blue, 2 24 AM51 in red, 1 21A in blue, 1 23A in blue, 1 22A beige color, and 1 ambulance.
Volkswagens were seen in Canada for the first time at the Canadian National Exhibition in August 1952 and were accepted enthusiastically.
At least one Type 2 bus from this order still exists and is currently in France undergoing restoration.
The first shipment for Volkswagen Canada reached Toronto in early December 1952.
At least one Type 1 from this first shipment still exists and was driven on a nationwide tour for Volkswagen Canada's 60th year of business festivities in 2012.
By 1955, sales warranted the building of the Volkswagen plant on a 32-acre, 13 hectares site on Scarborough's Golden Mile.
To this, a 60,000 square foot, 5,600 square meters building with administration, showrooms, service, repairs and parts was built in 1957, with storage for $4 million of parts.
In 1959, VW started production at a plant near Sao Paulo in Brazil.
Volkswagen de Brazil was accused of spying on workers during the time of the military dictatorship in the 1970s and informing police on oppositional activities.
In 1976, mass arrests occurred and some VW employees were tortured.
In 1979, Brazilian VW workers traveled to Wolfsburg to inform the CEO in person.
In 2015, activists and former VW employees in Brazil spoke out in public, accused the company's silence about the persecution of its workers.
In fall 2016, VW commissioned an expert review of the situation due end of 2017.
On 22 August 1960, Volkswagen Work GmbH was renamed to Volkswagen Work AG.
Sales soared throughout the 1960s, peaking at the end of the decade thanks, in part to the famous advertising campaigns by New York advertising agency Doyle, Bernbach.
Led by art director Helmut Krohn and copywriters Julian Koenig and Bob Levinson, Volkswagen advertisements became as popular as the car, using crisp layouts and witty copy to lure the younger, sophisticated consumers with whom the car became associated.
Even though it was almost universally known as the Beetle or the Bug, it was never officially labeled as such by the manufacturer, instead referred to as the Type 1.
Although the car was becoming outdated during the 1960s and early 1970s, American exports, innovative advertising, and a growing reputation for reliability helped production figures surpass the levels of the previous record holder, the Ford Model T.
On 17 February 1972, the 15,007,034th Beetle was sold.
Volkswagen could now claim the world production record for the most produced single make-of car in history.
By 1973, total production was over 16 million.
To commemorate its passing the Ford Model T's record sales mark and its victories in the Baja 1000 Mexican races from 1967 to 1971, Volkswagen produced its first limited edition Beetle.
It was marketed as the La Champion SE in the United States and the Marathon Super Beetle in the rest of the world.
It featured unique Marathon Law metallic blue paint, steel pressed 10-spoke 15-inch 38 centimeters magnesium alloy wheels, a commemorative metal plate mounted on the glove box, and a certificate of authenticity presented to the original purchaser.
Dealer-installed options for this limited edition Super Beetle included the following: white stripes running the length of the rocker panel, a special shifter knob, bumper overriders, tapered exhaust tips, fake walnut inserts in the dashboard, behind the steering wheel on the glove box cover, as well as Bosch fog lights mounted on the front bumper.
The 1961 Type 1 Beetle had a 36 horsepower 1200 cubic centimeters 4-cylinder air-cooled flat 4, a Toto HD engine made of aluminium alloy block and heads.
By 1966, the Type 1 came with a 1300 cubic centimeters engine.
By 1967, the Type 1 had a 1500 cubic centimeters engine and 1600 cubic centimeters in 1970.
The air-cooled engine lost favor in the United States market with the advent of unleaded petrol and smog controls.
These air-cooled engines were commonly tuned to be fuel-rich in order to control engine overheating, and this led to excessive carbon monoxide emissions.
VW production equipment was eventually moved to Mexico, where vehicle emissions were not regulated.
Beetles were popular on the U.S. West Coast, where the limited capacity cabin heating was less inconvenient.
Beetles were popularized on the U.S. West Coast as beach buggies and dune buggies.
VW expanded its product line in 1961 with the introduction of 4 Type 3 models: Carmandia, Notchback, Fastback, and Variant, based on the new Type 3 mechanical underpinnings.
The name Squareback was used in the United States for the Variant.
In 1969, the larger Type 4, 411 and 412 models were introduced.
These different differed substantially from previous vehicles, with a notable introduction of monocoque/uni body construction, the option of a fully automatic transmission, electronic fuel injection, and a sturdier power plant.
In 1964, Volkswagen acquired Auto Union, and in 1969, NSU Motor Network AG, NSU.
The former company owned the historic Audi brand, which had disappeared after the Second World War.
VW ultimately merged Auto Union and NSU to create the modern Audi company, and would go on to develop it as its luxury vehicle mark.
The purchase of Auto Union and NSU was a pivotal point in Volkswagen's history, as both companies yielded the technological expertise that proved necessary for VW to survive when demand for its air-cooled models went into decline.
Volkswagen added a Super Vito, the Type 131, to its lineup in 1971.
The Type 131 differed from the standard Beetle in its use of a McPherson strut front suspension instead of the usual torsion bars.
The Super Vito featured a new hooded, padded dash and curved windshield from 1973 model year on up.
Rack and pinion steering replaced recirculating ball steering gears in the model year 1975 and up.
The front of the car was stretched 2 inches, 51 millimeters, to allow the spare tire to lie flat, and the combination of these two features increased the usable front luggage space. In 1973, Volkswagen introduced the military-themed Type 181, or Checker in Europe, thing in America, recalling the wartime Type 82.
The military version was produced for the NATO era German army during the Cold War years of 1970 to 1979.
The US thin version only sold for 2 years, 1973 and 1974. By late 1972, Volkswagen had decided to cancel the nearly finished TIP 266, a project for a mid-engine car to replace the Beetle and to focus on front-wheel drive, water-cooled cars.
Rudolf Leiting, recently made head of Volkswagen, cited noise, heat, and servicing problems with a mid-engine layout, as well as the difficulty of making it a station wagon.
Volkswagen was in serious trouble by 1973.
The Type 3 and Type 4 models had sold in much smaller numbers than the Beetle, and the NSU-based J70 also failed to sell.
Beetle sales had started to decline rapidly in European and North American markets.
The company knew that Beetle production had to end, but faced a conundrum of how to replace it.
VW's ownership of Audi/Auto Union proved beneficial.
Its expertise in front-wheel drive and water-cooled engines would help Volkswagen produce a credible Beetle successor.
Audi influences paved the way for this new generation of Volkswagens, the Passat, Scirocco, Golf, and Polo. First in the series was the Volkswagen Passat Dasher in the US, introduced in 1973, a fastback version of the Audi 80, using many identical body and mechanical parts.
Estate/wagon versions were available in many markets.
In Europe, the estate/wagon version dominated market share for many years. In spring 1974, the Scirocco followed.
The coupe was designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro.
Based on the platform of the not yet released Golf, it was built at Carman due to capacity constraints at Volkswagen. The pivotal model emerged as the Volkswagen Golf in 1974, marketed in the United States and Canada as the Rapid for the first generation, 1975 to 1985, and fifth generation, 2006 to 2009.
Its angular styling was designed by the Italian Giorgetto Giugiaro.
Its design followed trends for small family cars set by the 1959 Mini. The Golf had a transversely mounted water-cooled engine in the front, driving the front wheels, and had a hatchback. A format that has dominated the market segment ever since.
Beetle production at Wolfsburg ended upon the Golf's introduction.
It continued in smaller numbers at other German factories, Hanover and Emden, until 1978, but mainstream production shifted to Brazil and Mexico. In 1975, the Volkswagen Polo followed.
It was a revamped Audi 50, which was soon discontinued in 1978.
The Polo became the base of the Volkswagen Derby, which was introduced in 1977.
The Derby was for all intents and purposes a V-Box design of the Polo.
After a second model generation, the Derby was discontinued in 1985, although the body style lived on in the form of the Polo Classic/Polo Saloon until 1991. Passat, Scirocco, Golf, and Polo shared many character-defining features as well as parts and engines.
They built the basis for Volkswagen's turnaround. We will continue about Volkswagen in Part 3.